In this video, we're going to compare the advantages and disadvantages of storing files into a database versus using a cloud service to store files like Azure Storage and then storing the URLs of those files into a database. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the advantages of using a cloud service. The first thing that we must take into account is cost, is pricing. For example, if we compare Azure SQL Database and Azure Storage and we use the Azure Calculator, we can see that storing 250 gigabytes of information in an Azure SQL Database costs us about $14 a month. Meanwhile, using the same amount of data in Azure Storage only costs us $6 per month, and therefore this means a reduction in cost of about 64%. Also, we must take into account that if we store files into a database, it means that that database can become huge, and therefore not only we have to pay a lot for storing that big database, that huge database, but also we have to pay a lot of money for storing the backups of that database, because of course if the database is big, therefore the backups are big also. Third, another advantage that we have when using a cloud service is that we can freely distribute the links of our files. On the other hand, if we have our files into a database, then we cannot freely distribute those links. We have to distribute, for example, an endpoint of our web API so that users can, through our web API, make a query to our database and then get the file that they want to get. And this leads us to our fourth and final advantage of using a cloud service, and that is scalability. For example, if we want to allow a user to download a file from our database, then it means that they must do an HTTP GET to our web API and then do a query to our database in order to be able to download that file. Now imagine if thousands upon thousands of users do the same, then our database is going to be hit, it's going to have a performance hit, and also our web API. Then it means that our solution in general will not be as scalable as it could be. Meanwhile, if we use a cloud service, then it means that we can offload that into that cloud service, and therefore our web API and our database can only focus on serving information to our users. Now let's talk about the advantages of storing files into a database. The first one have to do with transactions. Because if, for example, if you have a big store procedure and that store procedure do a lot of operations and you only want to delete a file that is in a table, if all of the operations are successful, then you can put everything into a transaction, and therefore if everything is successful, then the transaction will be committed. On the other hand, if not everything is successful, then everything can be rolled back, and therefore you are not going to lose your file. On the other hand, to do the same, when you have operations in a database and you also have files in a cloud service, it is a little bit more challenging because you need to make sure that everything is correct on that database side in order for you to be able to go to the cloud service and delete the corresponding file. So there is a little bit of more work to do in the case where you have the file in a cloud service. Secondly, we must talk about security. It is easier for us to simply secure our database, and that will also secure our files. But if you have your files into a cloud service, then it means that you have to secure not only your database, but also the cloud service that stores the files. This may not be the end of the world, but it certainly means that you have to be an expert in security in databases and also do the same, apply the same security rules in your cloud service that you are going to use. Because for sensitive information, as we said, that it was an advantage of being able to have links that you can just distribute, that was an advantage for using a cloud service. You have to think that if there is sensitive information behind of those links, then it means that you have to protect them. You have to have mechanisms so that unauthorized users cannot access those sensitive files that you have in the cloud service. That doesn't happen if you use your database to store files, because you have the default security mechanisms for your database to be able to protect those files, those sensitive files. So as you can see, in both scenarios there are advantages and disadvantages. What is more convenient to you? That depends on your business needs. Let's talk in the comments other advantages or disadvantages that you can think of. Thank you.